everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Charlene, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my personal reading journey with Jane Austen. In case you haven't heard, Anne from In Search of Wonder and I are hosting a year-long celebration of Jane Austen because her birthday in December this year is her 250th. And so we wanted to celebrate all year long with all things Jane Austen. And we're hosting a year-long read-along with her books and some of the books that inspired her writing. And we're also doing some extra videos throughout the year talking about things related to Jane Austen. And this month we decided to talk about our personal experience with reading Jane Austen. And as the Jane Austen newbie, you would think mine would be fairly short. I read this one book, this is what I thought about it, end of story, but not quite. But before I get into all of that, I am drinking tea in this video, as I'm going to be doing with every extra Jane Austen video we do this year, instead of drinking my normal coffee. And I specifically picked out this tea because I thought it was very fitting. So the tea that I'm drinking is actually one that was given to me, and it is this Pemberley I knew I was going to mispronounce that. Pemberley Puer tea. And it is a loose leaf tea. It does say it's high in caffeine, but it is by Novel Teas. And if you go on their website, which I will have this tea linked down in the description below, it also says that you can pair this up with Pride and Peppermint. So this is just a puer tea. There's no extra flavors or anything in it. So you can mix it with other things if you want some extra flavors. And again, I will link it down in the description if you want to check it out, or any of their other teas. So my personal journey through reading Jane Austen began in February of 2018. Actually, I guess technically it could have started in January. I'm not exactly sure. But I do know I had picked up Sense and Sensibility because I owned a bind-up of, I think, 5 of her novels and wanted to read through them in publication order. And Sense and Sensibility is the first one. So I picked that one up, but I only got a few chapters in, and honestly, I was feeling very confused. I was struggling to keep the three sisters straight in particular, and it made it very hard to feel engaged with the story when I'm not even sure who is who all the time. So I decided to DNF that one, at least for the time being, and try one of her other books and see if I didn't get along with it better. And the one I decided to go with was Pride and Prejudice, because it mostly seems to be the fan favorite. My thought at the time was if I couldn't get through Pride and Prejudice, I would try Emma, because while there are a lot of people who don't like Emma, it is one that seems to be commonly really liked. Like if Pride and Prejudice isn't someone's favorite, Emma seems to be. So I figured I would give that one a try, and if I didn't like either of those two books, then Jane Austen just wasn't for me. Well, I was able to read all of Pride and Prejudice, and while I did enjoy a lot of the different aspects of the book, I actually found it a struggle to get into her writing. It's hard to describe, but I feel like she wrote a certain way and I read it a different way. And that probably doesn't make sense to most people. But there was a point while reading this book where I thought back to how I was reading the book when I first started it. And I think most people are familiar with the opening line to Pride and Prejudice. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a man, I'm probably going to butcher the last part of this, I'm sorry. A man with a good fortune must be in want of a wife. It's something to that effect. And, you know, I remember reading that and just finding it very funny. And so for the first paragraph or two, probably, maybe page or two, I read it with that bit of humor in mind. But I think as the book went on, I was reading it with more of a serious tone in mind. And it was just coming across as, I don't know if dry is the right word, but just a writing style that didn't work for me. It didn't draw me into the story. And I realized that partway through the book and thought, well, what if I tried reading it with more of that humorous, sarcastic, snarky type of tone to the story? And when I read a few paragraphs that way, all of a sudden I was like, oh, the book got interesting again. But it was a hard mindset for me to keep throughout the book for some reason. So it really is one of those things that if something is meant to be humorous and you read it as serious, you get a very different experience. And I think that was part of my problem with Pride and Prejudice. So I did enjoy the book, but at the time that I finished it, I felt like it was the type of story that I would enjoy more as a movie than as a book, which I know is like sacrilegious to say, but I have enjoyed a lot of rom-coms. And so it just seemed to make sense that if I enjoyed those types of stories as movies, this might also be one that I would enjoy more as a movie. And so I did at some point watch the BBC adaptation of this, and I absolutely loved the story. Completely fell in love with it, completely understand why so many people are obsessed with it. But the book itself, I hadn't originally felt that way. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. And I didn't end up picking up any more of her novels because I thought I did get through one full novel. I enjoyed it. I'm just not sure she's the author for me. But as you'll see, I have kind of changed my mind a little bit. So this was in February of 2018. I DNF'd Sense and Sensibility. I read all of Pride and Prejudice all in the same month. Then in February of 2019, apparently there is a theme with February, I noticed with her books. I picked up an Emma retelling by Alexander McCall Smith. And this is supposed to be a modern retelling, reimagining of Emma. However, I could tell, even having not read Emma, I could tell by reading this that he basically tried to change almost as little as possible from the original story, but give it a modern setting. So like there's two characters that know each other because they met each other in this other town. And in this book, they actually met at Cambridge because they were at university together. There were different things like that where it was tweaked a little bit to make it have a more modern feel to it. But there was a lot that he really didn't change in the book. However, there was one key thing that he did change in the book that I did not care for. So that definitely brought down my enjoyment of the book. But overall, I didn't like the character of Emma. And I know she's a character who grows and changes throughout the book, but I didn't like her character for most of the book, and so I didn't enjoy that book. And then it was after I read that book, I don't know exactly when. I can tell you it was somewhere between February of 2019 and January of 2023 that I watched the BBC adaptations of both Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. And I really enjoyed both of them. And I feel like now, having seen the adaptation of Sense and Sensibility, it will be a lot easier for me to keep track of which sister is which. So I've been less hesitant to pick up the books since watching the adaptations because it just seems like I might enjoy them more now that I know the story and I'm not trying to figure out the story while trying to figure out the writing at the same time. However, it wasn't until January of 2023 that my interest in reading her books peaked again. And in January of 2023, I read a graphic novel adaptation of Northanger Abbey by Nancy Butler. This one, from what I could tell from reading it and from reviews that I saw of it, it's pretty much the text from the book. It's just not the entire text of the book. She picked and chose which parts of the narrative she was going to include, which dialogue to include, all of that. But it is actual lines from the novel. And honestly, when I started this graphic novel, I just thought, this is absolutely hilarious. And it made me want to pick up Northanger Abbey. I went online and I borrowed an ebook version of it. I started trying to read it. And yes, I can tell you, at least for the first part of the book, it does quote the book verbatim. But again, I was struggling to get into her writing style. And I think in this particular case, it's because I was able to read through the graphic novel so quickly, like get through 4 or 5 pages so quickly before I decided to try the novel, that I almost went into the book with a feeling of, oh, I'm going to be able to fly through this. And the first page or two was taking quite a bit out of me because that's not her writing style. It's not a you can just fly through this writing style, at least for me. And I think that's what made me go, nope, I'll go back to the graphic novel. So I did finish Northanger Abbey. Absolutely love the story. And then in February of 2023, told you February is kind of a theme here, I also read her graphic novel versions of Sense and Sensibility and Emma. Now, Sense and Sensibility, once again, absolutely loved. Emma, first of all, I will say, and probably part of this is from having read the modern retelling of Emma, I knew the story a little bit better, and it felt rushed. It felt like And probably because Emma is a longer book than the other two, there was a whole lot more story to cram into roughly the same amount of pages in the graphic novel as compared to two of the books that were shorter than it. And so it felt rushed. It felt like everything was just crammed in very tightly to get the entire story in really too short of a page count. But again, I walked away from it not liking Emma. And I've kind of been in the mindset of, I just don't think this is a story I'm going to like. I like Pride and Prejudice. I like the story of Sense and Sensibility. I like the story of Northanger Abbey. I don't think Emma's going to be one of them. But I have been more intrigued since then to actually pick up her novels. Now, there are a few other movie adaptations I have seen of her books since reading the graphic novels. I did watch the movie called Modern Persuasion, which is a obviously modern retelling of Persuasion. I don't know the story of Persuasion. I haven't read the book. I haven't read a graphic novel, anything like that. But I was kind of curious. And overall, I thought the movie was fine. It wasn't one that I loved. But I will say, I'm hoping that this is just a movie thing. Because early on, there was a male character who showed up. And I did not like him. I didn't want the main character to end up with him. And I realized, I think about 5 or 10 minutes after he showed up that, oh no, this is the guy she's going to end up with, isn't he? And it was. I'm hoping I don't have that same feeling of dread when I actually read Persuasion as I did with the movie. I'm hoping it's just the way the character was portrayed or something about the actor. I'm hoping it's something like that and not the story itself. But we will see. But the movie itself was okay. Then I also watched Clueless, which is technically a modern retelling of Emma. And other than the ex-stepbrother part, I actually really enjoyed that one. It's the first thing with Emma I had seen where I didn't hate the main character. So that's a positive. Then I also watched the Keira Knightley version of Pride and Prejudice, which I also really enjoyed. I do like the BBC better. I feel like the pacing fits more in line with the book, plus you're able to get more of the story, but I did really enjoy the Keira Knightley version. And then last year in the fall, I want to say either September or October, I also ended up watching the 2020 version of Emma. And once again, we had a case where I got to the end of the movie and I was like, I didn't hate this. I didn't hate Emma the whole way through. So I don't know if I'm just getting more used to her character, or these particular portrayals of Clueless and the Emma movie made me not dislike the character as much. I'm not sure. But I'm hoping that's a good sign for actually reading Emma this year. So the only book I've actually read is Pride and Prejudice. But I have seen movie adaptations for Sense and Sensibility and Emma, as far as trying to be true to the novel adaptations. I've seen or read modern adaptations of Emma and Persuasion. And then I've read the graphic novel version of Northanger Abbey as well. So really the only books that I know nothing about are Mansfield Park and Lady Susan. And honestly, Modern Persuasion, it's been long enough since I've seen it. There's very little I remember about the movie now. So very little I know about the story in general. So those three are the ones that this year I feel like I'm going into blind. The rest, I at least know a good portion of the story. So I'm hoping this time around my reading experience is a lot better. And also reminding myself, just take my time. These are not books you're going to fly through. It's okay if it takes some time. And hopefully that will also lend itself to me enjoying the books more. So my story is probably a lot shorter than Anne's is going to be, but that is my experience with Jane Austen so far. I will have Anne's video linked down in the description below as well, so if you want to see what her journey with Jane Austen has been like, you can check out her video also. That is all I have for you guys for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know which of Jane Austen's books you've read and what you thought of them. Other than that, I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you later.